The second submission I'm working on is something that I call the evidence of missing evidence. And this is, I came up with that title because this is considered to be an evidence-based review. They've actually been pretty clear that they really don't want to hear about our passions. They want scientific evidence. The problem is that the scientific evidence is very new. So I thought that part of the evidence that I would like to present to them is how much is missing and how significant that needs to be in making decisions. So, so I'm looking at the gaps in evidence and what would be a responsible conclusion to take in terms of policy, given that. So there's a number of reasons that evidence is missing. The first one is that the science is new, and the way I answered your question, I mean, some of these technologies have been used before, but the combination of them and the magnitude of them is very, very new. So science takes a while. I mean, first you have to identify a problem, then you have to develop sort of what it is you want to research, then you have to find money, then you have to do the research, and then you have to get it peer reviewed. That process usually takes at least 5 years, and the longer the study, the bigger the study, the longer it's going to take. So there's a legitimacy to some of the science that we're missing, that just couldn't be expected to exist at this point. But there are other reasons that we're missing evidence. One of those is the lack of full reporting of information. When you look at information from Alberta, from BC, and from the States, what you find in government records is these huge gaps. One of the things we found out last year in Alberta is there was a huge oil spill that couldn't be kind of made invisible, and Alberta's always said we had never had any problems. When this spill happened, there had to be an investigation, or there was an investigation, by a government body, which found that in fact there had been 21 similar incidents in the last year. And the reason no one knew about it is the companies weren't required to report them. So government records say there are no incidents. They say there's no incidents because they never asked for them to be reported. And that's not only true in Alberta, it's true virtually everywhere that fracking is taking place. You find huge gaps in the information. Added to that, the regulators, the people who were supposed to be going out and inspecting wells, finding out if things are going well, writing up violations, keeping track of them, are completely overworked. So in Pennsylvania, where this industry is booming, there was a study by a nonprofit group, and this is what they said. They found that every year, hundreds of thousands of oil and gas wells, 53 to 91% of wells in the states that were studied, and that was 6 states, 350,000 active wells, are operating with no inspections to determine whether they're in compliance with state rules. So there's your missing evidence. How do we know where the problems are when there's no inspections going? 53 to 91% of those wells were not inspected. So we don't know. We don't know we don't know how many leaks there are. We don't know what's going on. So that's another piece of the problem. Another piece, which I think we've all heard about, is what I call suppression of information. So we have things like non-disclosure of all the chemicals that are in the fracking fluids. Companies will not release that information. Now they're releasing some of the information, but not all of the information. They have a right to exempt certain things, get them exempted, and when you don't have the information, then, in fact, doctors have problems treating patients, and also doctors have problems tracking problems and identifying patterns. So the science is blocked by not releasing the information. A much more obvious example, two more obvious examples are secrecy agreements. When people have problems, if their wells are contaminated, their cattle are dying, and they make an agreement with the company to compensate them, they're sworn to secrecy. So those records are not revealed, and a court order got some information in Pennsylvania, released 160 different wells where there had been problems. In Alberta, the National Farmers Union has called for an end to secrecy agreements because they say, and the public can't know what the problems are, can't make informed decisions because of secrecy. And the third example is political industry pressure to drop studies. So in the U.S., the Environmental Protection Agency has the capacity to do investigation studies. We don't have any comparable body in Canada, and I think that's really important. But they did 3 in-depth studies of water contamination. Every single one was dropped. The first one, they actually documented contamination and tracked them to the likely cause being fracking. They were pressured to drop every single one. And recently, a PowerPoint was leaked from the EPA assessment of one place that said, yes, we believe there's contamination and it's long-term, and that was not the result that was released. The result that was released was, we think everything's okay. So there's a definite pattern of suppression of evidence, of key evidence. So what do you do in that situation? That's really the question, and I don't have the time to go into it, but that's really, so you have a certain amount of science, you have huge gaps in the science, and what do you do? And that's, I can talk later if anyone asking for it. I'm going to say about what I think they should do.